Discover the amazing truth, how my grandma's hidden traumas led to inspiring transformation at 80. Tyler Thompson stood in the creaky hallway of his grandmother's home, a place that had once felt alive but now hung heavy with silence. The scent of aged wood and dust suffocated him as memories flooded back, happy summers spent in secret forts made of blankets, the soft voice of Joan teaching him the letters of the alphabet, a world that felt both simpler and infinitely complex. He was a journalist in New York, having tasted the thrill of ambition but now felt the weight of failure pressing down just as heavily. Joan was 80, her health slipping away like sand from a cracked hourglass, and he had come home, a reluctant descendant of a lineage marked by unfulfilled dreams. As he ventured into the living room, the faded photo albums held stories he once cherished, yet now seemed like echoes of someone else's life. The weight of expectation suffocated him. What was he supposed to achieve here? Hadn't he flourished outside this town, far from the constraints of rural Kentucky? Divided between responsibility and his own neglected ambition, scruples twisted inside him, making him question himself. Was he just a failure turned to caretaker, or could he actually draw strength from his grandmother's silence? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days turned into nights filled with unease. The attic, long untouched, echoed his spiraling thoughts, an unguarded territory where Joan's past beckoned. As he rummaged through boxes overflowing with letters and faded journals, fragments of Joan's life, her struggles with society's rigid expectations, her sacrifices during the Great Depression, dreams of writing for acclaimed newspapers seemed to leap from the pages. His heart raced with each word, a mirror to his own feelings of being stifled by the expectations that plagued him, both personally and professionally. Yet every revelation filled him with an inner turmoil. How could he honor her struggles without exposing his own vulnerabilities? Maximizing the pressure, an anguish clawed at his gut. Was he merely preparing her story for others to consume while leaving his unsaid? He wanted Joan's voice to sing through his writing, yet with each ambitious stroke of the pen, the stakes intensified, twisting knots of fear within him. This wasn't he just writing, it was creating a legacy that could miscarry if he failed. The journal's pages weighed heavily on his hands, almost taunting him, a visceral reminder of everything he had yet to achieve, or to risk losing. The unresolved tension wrapped tighter around Tyler, suffocating him with conflicting responsibilities. What if he poured his heart out, only to crash against the hard walls of criticism? The notion of failure became insurmountable. Yet the more he uncovered, the more he realized that within the stories of his grandmother were echoes of his own conflicts, begging to be shared. Faced with this undeniable truth, he grappled with the decision before him. Would he step into the light? Could he share the hidden traumas of Joan and allow them to inspire transformation, or would he retreat once more into the shadows? Standing paralyzed in the attic, the pages of history swirling around him, Tyler clutched the fragile papers as another truth clawed its way into his consciousness. Success wasn't just about accolades or recognition, but about honoring the past to illuminate the future. Yet fear held him captive, leaving him in a state of turmoil, suspended on the brink of an awakening he was terrified to embrace. What would he choose? Face the fear, or resign to silence once again? The weight of the attic's secrets became an unbearable burden for Tyler, pressing down on him like the stagnant air. With each page he turned, he felt himself both unraveling and knitting together, threads of his identity weaving into the fabric of Joan's story. He was standing at a crossroads. What began as a meandering exploration of family history now felt like a call to action. The realization tore through him, the stories he unearthed could change lives, including his OWN.in, his grandmother's faded handwriting. He saw glimpses of resilience that stirred something dormant inside him. Each letter chronicled her triumphs over societal expectations, her quiet rebellions that had cost her so much. Compelled by her words, Tyler confronted the weight of his own ambition, now buried under fears of inadequacy and the haunting echoes of his past failures. Slowly, the realization began to crystallize: his writing wasn't simply for others, it was his personal pilgrimage, a battle against the very fears that shackled his potential. As he collected the remnants of her life, his mind shifted away from the daunting task of crafting her legacy to the discovery of his own purpose. Driven by trepidation and curiosity, Tyler began jotting down his thoughts in his own journal, an idea that had lain dormant since his college days. Would these reflections prepare him to share a narrative not only of Joan but of himself? The act of writing became an outlet, a channel through which he could confront vulnerabilities he had long considered weaknesses. The nights extended, wrapped in solitude, and the neighborhood grew familiar, its sounds filtering through the walls. On soft evenings, the sunset painted a hope across the landscape. Tyler found himself enjoying these moments of clarity, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon, illuminating what lay ahead. He started to envision the possibility of a new chapter, one where his grandmother's courage inspired him to rekindle his voice, silenced by conformity and fear. Yet, lurking in the shadows of his newfound determination, doubt clawed at him. Could he truly defy the expectations he had crafted for himself? What if every word he penned stung with truth but fell flat in the eyes of an unforgiving world? Each sentence emerged from his pen trembling with an urgency to lay bare his struggles, yet the prospect of judgment loomed large, threatening to extinguish the flicker of resolve. On a night heavy with the scent of rain, as thunder rolled serenely in the distance, Tyler faced a crucible moment. A stack of Joan's journals lay spread across the attic floor, each page a silent confidant wielding extraordinary power. How could he merge his voice with hers, harmonizing their stories to strike a chord that resonated? As he contemplated the pages, time seemed to freeze. Beneath the weight of fear lay an undeniable truth: this journey demanded more than casual reflection, it required an unwavering commitment to authenticity. His heart raced as he tapped into a forgotten pool of creativity. With each deliberate stroke of his pen, he experienced clarity, a connection forming between his insecurities and his grandmother's triumphs. Could it be that the hidden traumas of Joan were mirrors revealing his own? But as his pen danced with newfound fervor, another unsettling question surfaced. Was he prepared to share this rawness with the world? The thought terrified him. What if the unveiling of their intertwined narratives led to rejection, to doubt washing over his resolve like a relentless tide? Standing amidst the whispers of the attic, his pulse quickened. Tyler stared down the barrel of possibility, ready to face the fears that threatened to consume him. The time had come to gather courage, to weave Joan's legacy into the fabric of his own resurgence. But would he be strong enough to expose the truths both terrifying and liberating? As he began drafting a lead for the first chapter, an urgent thought pierced his concentration: if he dared to face this uncertainty, what revelations awaited him in the process? In that dimly lit attic, a shift occurred both within himself and in the tales begging to be told. Now, as he stood on the precipice of a new discovery that could redefine both their lives, he questioned whether the risks were worth the long-awaited reward. The moment had come to step into the light, but what awaited him would change everything. The morning sun spilled into the attic through a small window, igniting the airborne dust motes like tiny stars. Tyler adjusted his position on the floor, surrounded by scattered pages, each cradling pieces of Joan's life, and regarded the potential of his next step. With fresh ink glistening next to the words he had written, self-doubt lurked like a ghost in the corners of his mind, whispering that perfection was unattainable, the perennial enemy of nascent endeavors. Determined to confront that specter, Tyler pushed aside the nagging thoughts. The simple act of writing was more than merely reproducing Joan's words, it was the alchemy of transforming her struggles into a catalyst for his own change. He flipped open his personal journal. The pages called to him, inviting exploration of his thoughts and feelings with the same honesty that Joan displayed. Words spilled from his pen, his heart raw yet liberated, channeling Joan's bravery into his own narrative. What if my fears do matter? He mused as he scribbled. What if I allow their weight to speak, rather than stifle my voice? Each confession became a brick laying the foundation for an identity that had long lain dormant. The cascade of ideas flowed like a river breaking through frozen ground. In articulating his vulnerabilities, he hijacked his fears, transforming them into the building blocks of resilience. As the days progressed, each visit to the attic drew him deeper into the labyrinth of his grandmother's past and, inevitably, his own. He began structuring his writing sessions, dedicating blocks of time to explore key themes: identity, courage, and loss. He questioned the narratives he had lived by, peeling the layers off not just Joan's life but his. For too long, he had hidden behind the perception of who he should be rather than who he truly was. That decision to confront himself was monumental. It revealed unexpected strengths. He never imagined he would find solace in vulnerability, but each word provided a healing salve. It's only in the embracing of discomfort that growth unfolds, he penned, staring at the bold strokes leading to clarity. Would exploring Joan's fears and triumphs unearth similar wellsprings of courage in him? As he wrote, he visualized combining their voices, her struggles resonating with his own in a duet that transcended generations. However, another layer of conflict unfurled. What awaited him on the other side of this transparency? The thought of exposing his raw self to the world was daunting. Reader judgment, familiar insecurities, and potential rejection loomed large like storm clouds threatening his fragile resolve. Yet there was also tantalizing potential: the notion that honesty could spark connection and dialogue, maybe even inspire others. On a particularly sweltering afternoon, Tyler made a decision: he would share his words with a trusted friend. The very thought twisted his stomach into knots. Vulnerability did not elicit nurturing responses from an uncaring world, but rather scrutiny. Yet, if he maintained the delicate dance between Joan's fears and his own, perhaps he would unearth a shared vulnerability, creating an emotional bridge spanning generations. As he prepared to meet with his friend, his heart raced. Could he articulate the shift he had experienced? Would revealing these insights fortify him or ultimately leave him exposed? He grasped the papers tightly as if they were lifelines, and he inhaled deeply, rallying his courage. Tyler stepped outside into the afternoon heat, the weight of possibility swirling around him like the summer breeze. Each step toward the coffee shop felt monumental, and he wondered what awaited him: affirmation, rejection, or perhaps unexpected clarity. The answers lay ahead, and the stakes had never been higher. In the path toward self-discovery, he recognized that confronting the truth required more than intent; it demanded action. As the glass door of the cafe beckoned, he questioned, was he truly ready to knit together their stories under the watchful eye of a world that could either celebrate or dismiss them? Stepping into the cafe, the buzz of conversation and the warmth of freshly brewed coffee embraced Tyler, creating a stark contrast to the tumult within him. The air thrummed with life, a gentle reminder that beyond his fear, the world continued unabated. Tyler scanned the room, searching for his friend Marcus, whose presence had always been a beacon of support. Just as his eyes landed on Marcus, seated by the window with an expectant smile, a wave of butterflies danced in his stomach. He made his way over, each step laden with the weight of vulnerability. The air around him buzzed with questions he couldn't quite articulate. What if Marcus dismissed his writing as mere ramblings? What if he found nothing compelling in the raw honesty Tyler aimed to convey? Tyler forced himself to breathe, reminding himself that this moment was meant to foster growth, not anchor him in doubt. "Hey, man. You look deep in thought," Marcus said, his voice pulling Tyler from his spiraling thoughts. Tyler nodded, attempting to match Marcus' infectious enthusiasm, but the smile came hesitantly. "Yeah, I brought something to share," Tyler managed, setting the papers on the table between them. The crumpled edges bore evidence of his anxious handling. "It's about my grandma." Marcus' eyes lit up with interest, a twinkle of curiosity lingering in the corners. "I'm all ears. What is it about?" Tyler inhaled deeply, gathering courage. "It's her story, but it's become more than just that for me. It's about grappling with her past, her traumas, and how those shaped who she was. And, I suppose, how it's reshaping me." The words tumbled out, mingling with the scent of coffee and sugar. He watched as Marcus took a moment, his expression shifting from curiosity to contemplation. That was the moment the raw exposure of his fears and aspirations laid bare on the table. Tyler caught a glimpse of the sincerity in Marcus' eyes as he began to flip through the pages, the tension in Tyler's chest thudding like a drum. "What you're doing is incredible," Marcus finally remarked, pausing on a page filled with Tyler's scrawled thoughts. "You're focusing on your vulnerabilities here. That is not easy, it takes guts." "I'm not sure if it's enough, though," Tyler replied, the default shadow of self-doubt creeping back in. "What if it doesn't resonate? What if nobody cares?" Marcus leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his voice firm. "That is the thing, Tyler. Your truth can connect with others who are grappling with their stories, even if it's just one person. But you've got to be willing to share it." The weight of those words settled over Tyler, illuminating the harsh reality of the path he was forging. He had begun this journey to find his own narrative, but now it unfolded into something larger, a collective experience of struggle, resilience, and eventual healing. As they discussed the content, exploring Tyler's fears and triumphs intertwined with his grandmother's, Tyler wrestled with the bittersweet realization that vulnerability was both frightening and liberating. Each compliment from Marcus unraveled tightly held threads of self-doubt, revealing a tapestry of strength he hadn't previously acknowledged. But that newfound strength begged the question, was it enough to simply express these internal truths? Could this burgeoning revelation translate into action beyond mere words? Clarity emerged that day as he gazed into Marcus' encouraging eyes, the need to forge connections through his story solidified, challenging him to move beyond self-examination to engage with the potential ripple effects of his narrative. The conversation flowed until the cafe buzz blurred into a backdrop, every moment igniting a path toward intention. Yet as they parted, a hollow echo of uncertainty haunted him. Was he adequately equipped to share not just words, but the vulnerability required to unearth the deeper stories hidden within? In that swirl of emotions, a new urgency for shared truth ignited in Tyler. The need to connect with others who had weathered their storms became a suffocating call to action. But one pivotal question lingered in the air: what would that connection ultimately require from him, and was he truly ready to face the stories that had remained sealed in silence for far too long? Sitting in his dimly lit room that night, Tyler felt the shadows claw at him. An impulsive decision had taken root. He needed to connect, not only through his writing but face to face. The scribbles on the pages felt inadequate, tangible but ephemeral tools to transmit feelings rather than genuine connections. He traced his fingers across the handwritten words, grappling with the weight of their meanings. They represented vulnerability, but the prospect of sharing beyond the written page was daunting. Would people perceive him as oversensitive or merely self-indulgent? Flashes of forced smiles in unenthusiastic gatherings sparked a series of doubts. He had always been the listener, the supportive friend, but now he found himself in the limelight, where honesty bore a heavier burden. The fear of judgment felt like a thick fog, clouding his determination. Tyler picked up his phone, a slight tremor in his hands. He searched for local writing groups, a place where he could actually speak about how the past molded identity, how his grandmother's stories intertwined with his own. As he scrolled, his heart raced, uncertainty warring with desire. But plunging into this unknown needed a strategy. A plan began to form in his mind. The engagement with vulnerability needed to manifest beyond mere words on paper. He settled on a nearby group that met weekly, a space for raw expression and shared narratives. He hesitated, thumb hovering over the confirm button. Would joining such a group peel back layers he wasn't ready to expose? Before doubts could fully settle in, he struck the button. Adrenaline surged through him. Interaction had always felt safe when he was merely a spectator, yet now, he was stepping onto the stage. Within days, Tyler found himself seated at the rustic wooden table surrounded by writers from various walks of life who were equally hungry for connection. The initial awkwardness was palpable. He could feel the collective tension filling the room, forcing open hearts in the face of potential rejection. In that hesitant space, he realized he wasn't alone in his trepidation. As members began sharing their pieces, stories of love, loss, and redemption, Tyler recognized common threads that bound them all. There was fear, there was courage, but more than anything, there was the instinctive need for validation. The stories cascaded around him, opening doors to their truths, revealing the complexity of human experience. Tyler wanted to join in, but part of him recoiled, the old insecurities clawing at him, whispering that his truths couldn't possibly carry the same weight. Tyler, would you like to share next? The moderator's question cut through his protective barrier. The room fell silent, every pair of eyes turned toward him, inviting yet intimidating. His heart hammered in his chest as he considered the choice. He took a deep breath, and the words began to swirl in his mind. I have something. It might be a little rough, he started, feeling the room's supportive energy wrap around him. As he began to speak, projecting the memories of his grandmother's laughter and sorrow, he surrendered to the flow of vulnerability. The cadence of his voice steadied, revealing layers of emotion he'd kept buried under the weight of self-doubt. He could see sparks of recognition in their eyes, nods of understanding that started to dismantle his fears. By sharing his story, not only was he bringing his grandmother's essence back to life, but he also unearthed his own buried sentiments. The act of speaking transformed into an act of defiance against silence that had suffocated him for too long. With each segment revealing the traumas that had once seemed insurmountable, he realized he was not just recounting, he was reclaiming a legacy that shaped his identity. Tyler finished his piece only to be met with applause, a collective stamp of approval that washed over him like a soothing balm. After the session, several participants approached him, eager to connect further. In those conversations, Tyler discovered the potency of shared experiences. He felt roots of empathy embedding themselves in him. These exchanges illuminated truths about potential relationships in vulnerability that shifted his understanding entirely. Yet, as exhilaration replaced anxiety, a deeper fear lingered. How far was he willing to go in exposing his truth? With every meeting, a new horizon beckoned, the stories called for deeper exploration. What long-buried emotions still waited to be unearthed from his heart? As he contemplated the next steps, he felt the stirrings of a profound journey about to unfold, one echoing the stories he hadn't yet dared to tell. Tyler sat at his cluttered desk, fingers hovering above the keyboard, the thrill of his recent exposure still coursing through his veins. The applause had ignited something he hadn't anticipated, a desire not merely to share but to understand the depths of his own narrative. With every story shared in that gathering, he had encountered facets of himself that had remained dormant for far too long. Now, he yearned to delve deeper. He had been processing the conversations he'd had since his storytelling debut. Each interaction acted like a mirror, reflecting aspects of his vulnerabilities that he had long neglected. The newfound connections birthed a sense of accountability and obligation to step further into this emerging identity that was taking shape. But what did that mean, exactly? What would he have to confront within himself to truly embrace this path? As he closed his eyes, a wave of memories crashed over him, the laughter of his grandmother, her stories that melded folklore, heartbreak, and wisdom. Each recollection was a thread intricately woven into the fabric of his existence. The act of public speaking had opened this Pandora's box of emotions, but now he felt the gravity of pushing beyond the superficial. Tyler sought out his notebook, its pages teeming with rough sketches of ideas, snippets of thoughts, and unformed narratives. It was time to redirect the cathartic energy locked in those pages into something more structured. He flipped to a blank page and began writing. What started as a simple exercise evolved into an exploration of those hidden traumas of his grandmother that had seeped into his own life. There was sorrow, loss, and the understanding that her experiences shaped his views on love and loyalty. Did those pains come with deterministic shackles, or could they be transformed into stepping stones? Each thought expanded into a complex web of inquiry, as Tyler started mapping out the overarching themes he'd like to weave into his next piece, a narrative that could connect generations, bridging the gap between past and present. But doubt lingered on the periphery. Questions swirled. What if he misrepresented her pain? What if the strongest strands of loyalty turned out to be entrapments? Tyler recognized that vulnerable honesty required a balance that he had to navigate with skill and sensitivity. The imperative to tread carefully grew in urgency. In the days that followed, he decided to dedicate his mornings to exploration and reflection. Each day before presenting at the group meetings, he would write out passages inspired by memories, then dissect the words for deeper truths about himself. What component of his identity stemmed from his grandmother's life? Which traumas could be reframed as catalysts for courage rather than shackles to his self-esteem? As he began sharing these fragments in the writer's group, he found every reading integrated more of his grandmother's legacy, but they also spotlighted his own unresolved conflicts. He encountered layers of fear and anxiety that cascaded with each reveal, and though he writhed under the discomfort, something profoundly liberating began to unfold. It became clear to Tyler that reckoning with inherited pain was not just a personal journey, it was about embracing the fact that others would likely relate. Through his storytelling, he could break the silence that had encased those experiences. Yet, insecurity crept back in. With increased intensity came the lingering question, could he trust his voice to resonate and not isolate? Ultimately, he recognized his writing was more than a testament to his past, it could serve as a vehicle for understanding collective struggles. By unveiling his vulnerabilities, perhaps he could help others process their own narratives too, creating a chain reaction of healing and awareness. But soon, as the next group meeting loomed, an unsettling thought gripped him. He understood that grappling with these truths would come at a cost. How would one reveal the depths of entrenched family trauma while evading the pitfall of becoming overwhelmed? Tyler closed his notebook, filled with both anticipation and dread. What would happen when he fully embraced the story waiting to be told? Would the act of telling shatter him or forge him anew? The time had come to confront those hidden traumas that shaped not just his grandmother, but the man he was becoming. Would he brave the depths of this exploration, or would fear send him retreating into silence once again? Tyler's fingers trembled as he contemplated the weight of the next meeting. He had spent days dissecting his grandmother's life, pondering the profound implications it had on his own identity. His heart raced at the thought of divulging raw truths amidst a room full of strangers who had become close companions in the realm of storytelling. Each story shared felt like a piece of armor stripped away, rendering him vulnerable and exposed. Before the group session, resting in the safety of his cluttered desk, he drafted a passage aimed to encapsulate the delicate intricacies of his grandmother's struggles. It was a balancing act, threading the fine line between historical reverence and personal contagion. As he wrote, he encouraged himself to dig deeper, to think critically about how her pain shaped him. Would those reflections resonate, or would the audience perceive him as self-indulgent? The feigned confidence he often wore now seemed like a thin shell, cracking under the pressure of anticipated judgment. Yet, the urge to uncover and share was stronger than his self-doubt. Could he really redefine the established narrative spun around inherited trauma? He had to believe that confronting this darkness could serve as a beacon for others caught in similar struggles. The night before the meeting, he stayed up late, sifting through old family photographs and letters. Each artifact whispered stories of resilience but also of suppression. It became evident that his grandmother's experiences, the loss of her homeland, the disintegration of her dreams, the burdens carried in silence, had embedded themselves deeply within him. They were not merely details of her life, they were foundational elements of his own essence. The morning of the meeting, he felt a surge of resolve. Moving through the city, he sought solace in the bustling streets. Each passerby became a fragmented reflection of his journey, people navigating their complexities tired, hopeful, anxious. He wondered how many carried unseen burdens, how many were waiting for validation through the power of a shared story. Arriving at the small gathering space, he noticed familiar faces, each glowing with their own determination to share and be heard. His heart pounded as he took a seat in the circle, nodding at the warm greetings. When it was his turn, he felt an electric charge surge through him, an invitation not only to tell but to unveil, to expose the fragility of both his journey and his grandmother's. As he began to speak, his careful words coalesced into a narrative that captured the essence of hope intertwined with heartache. The air held its breath, and for the first time, he felt the room as energy shift. No longer merely a spectator, he had ignited empathy. Each sentence was a brushstroke painting vivid imagery of his grandmother's life, the struggles that loomed large yet illuminated by strength and perseverance. However, as Tyler delved deeper, he couldn't shake the anxiety clawing at his insides, questioning if he was crossing an unseen boundary. Would his revelations open old wounds, both for himself and for those listening? The stories he recounted, once fortresses, became gaping chasms of vulnerability. Yet each moment that passed also shed layers of fear. It was becoming clear, this wasn't just about relaying trauma. This was about transformation, healing, and understanding that his narrative was more than an isolated experience. He was a conduit for shared emotional landscapes. As he wrapped up, silence enveloped the circle. Tyler anticipated the response, yet what he received was profound validation. Expressions of recognition flashed across faces, tears welled up, followed by words of reinforcement. It was then he realized that true growth lay not in the avoidance of pain, but in sharing it, in risking exposure for the sake of connection. Yet, as he stepped away from the meeting, a fresh wave of uncertainty washed over him. What if delving into these depths uncovered emotions he wasn't prepared to face? What if there was more to unravel, more layers of trauma that demanded exploration? The stakes had risen dramatically. He had opened a door, but what lay beyond regret or enlightenment? Would his journey into the tumultuous waters of his past help him redefine his future, or would he find himself lost amidst the swirling currents? As he walked home, the question loomed larger than ever: what was the price he was willing to pay for personal truth? The time had come to confront yet another layer of reality, one that could either bind him further to past pain or release him into newfound freedom. Morning light streamed through Tyler's bedroom window, illuminating the clutter of notes and photographs strewn across his desk. Each piece of paper felt alive with potential and yet hauntingly familiar, echoing the tumult of shared stories and raw revelations from the previous night. He had confronted the shadows of his grandmother's past, igniting a flame that flickered with both hope and trepidation. However, as he faced this new day, doubt gnawed at him with a fierce intensity. What next step should he take? The vulnerability he had shared with his storytelling circle had sparked curiosity and camaraderie, but it was also a call to further action, a call he hadn't fully anticipated. Tyler's reflection in the mirror caught him off guard. The determination and resolve that filled his heart a day ago seemed to be slipping from his grasp, replaced by questions that came crashing like waves against a fragile shore. He wrote down some of the questions swirling in his mind. Should he delve deeper into his grandmother's past, or was he riskily unearthing unresolved pain? The thought of facing more hidden trauma was daunting, particularly if it meant revisiting uncomfortable truths about his own identity. Yet, he recognized that those very truths were the essence of his connectivity to his grandmother's story. The clock's ticking echoed against the wall as Tyler forced himself to take action. He grabbed a jacket and stepped out, deciding to walk the familiar path to the small park where he often found solace. The blooming flowers and gentle rustle of leaves provided a fleeting distraction from his racing thoughts. He reflected on the myriad of stories he had heard during the previous night, the stories of loss, recovery, and resilience. As he settled onto a bench, his notebook perched open on his lap, he penned reflections about ancestral shadows. What hidden burdens did his grandmother carry that he had yet to learn? These thoughts spiraled into broader questions about his own journey. With each stroke of the pen, he confronted how he habitually buried his ambitions beneath the weight of expectation, just as his grandmother had buried her dreams. The light seemed almost blinding, revealing how their narratives were woven together, a complex tapestry of struggle and triumph. He began to sketch out ideas for his next storytelling piece, feeling a flicker of enthusiasm reincarnate within him. Perhaps he could bear witness on his grandmother's behalf, channeling the lessons from her life into transformative stories that could help illuminate the paths for others. A sense of purpose enveloped him, pushing him into deeper reflection. But challenges loomed. How could he articulate pain without appearing to exploit it? Navigating the delicate terrain between honoring her memory and expressing his truth would not only test his writing skills but also demand introspection and soul-searching. As Tyler stood to leave, a sudden push from within compelled him to commit his thoughts to action. He resolved to invite those in his storytelling circle to share more of their experiences directly linked to the themes he intended to explore. Creating a platform for collective healing seemed to be a vital step. But would they respond? Would they be willing to explore and shed light on their personal shadows alongside him? Walking toward home, he felt an unforeseen thrill intermingle with anxiety. This was not just about revisiting the past but about forging connections that could transform pain into wisdom. Yet uncertainty remained. How open and raw could he be, and what impact would those revelations have not only on him but on others? The time had come for decisive action, to confront fears of both personal revelation and the potential fallout. What if, by lifting the veil over his grandmother's sorrows, he opened a Pandora's box of emotions better left untouched? The question flickered dangerously. Was he ready to take that leap into vulnerability again, risking everything for a creation that might unleash truths perhaps best left hidden? The crucial moment approached, testing his resolve. Would he reclaim his narrative or succumb to doubt? Each footfall echoed the weight of his resolve and foreshadowed a greater confrontation awaiting on the horizon, the heart of his grandmother's legacy, and the awakening of his own. The sun drifted lazily through the trees as Tyler stepped into his apartment, the weight of unspoken questions bearing down on him. He tossed his jacket onto a nearby chair, his mind still wrestling with the possibilities of what lay ahead. Sitting at his desk with papers strewn around like scattered dreams, he felt a paradox urge within him, the eagerness to create something meaningful, yet the fear of unearthing pain that might shatter the fragile peace he had established in his life. He flipped through the notes he had taken, each word reminding him of the connections he sought to build. What if he could elevate their stories, place them against the backdrop of his grandmother's past? Thoughts cascaded, weaving elements of his life with those of his family. Would his circle be willing to exchange personal narratives? Each person came from their own world of struggles. Could he unlock the bond that would open a collective transformation? As the clock ticked on, his excitement morphed into a tension-filled spiral. He grabbed his phone and stared at the contact list of his storytelling circle. These were people he had invited into his life. They were trusted allies, yet now they felt like unknown variables in an equation that contained his grandmother's hidden truths. Would they validate the emotions tied to ancestral grief, or would they shrink back in fear? A flurry of thoughts consumed him. Previous members had shared their stories so openly, yet not all had experienced the accumulating weight of generational trauma. What if his honesty scared them away? Part of him craved their support, but another dreaded their judgment. He had to push through the discomfort, knowing that breakthrough moments often lay hidden in vulnerability. Tyler paused. The warmth of the afternoon sun bathed his desk, a natural spotlight drawing him toward the temptation to write an invitation. Each word would carry expectation, beckoning his peers to delve into their shared human experience. But what if he failed to articulate his intention clearly? Would they see this as an opportunity for shared healing or as just another discussion to ignore? With resolve, he began typing, meticulously crafting an invitation that urged his circle to contribute to the exploration of their narratives. Even if some resisted, he knew the act of reaching out in itself was essential. It mirrored a commitment to not just himself, but to the collective dynamics that existed within their shared experiences of pain and hope. Yet, doubts nagged at him. Was he equipped to facilitate such raw discussions? His hands trembled slightly over the keyboard as he pressed send, the motion feeling too final, too irrevocable. As soon as he did, the implications washed over him like frigid water. The unknown responses loomed ahead, taunting him with their unpredictability. Days interspersed with impatience followed. Each ping of his phone brought a mix of dread and excitement. Some replied with enthusiasm, others turned contemplative, needing time to think. Tyler worked vainly to suppress the swell of anxiety that gripped him as he could only assume what the hesitations meant. Had he opened the door too wide, or was he leading them toward a genuine breach they could all walk together? Each evening transformed into an internal battle. Self-criticism and recognition danced a chaotic tango within him. Yet, he clung to the belief that confronting the complexities of legacy would yield something transformative, not only for himself but for each of his narrative companions. In the quiet night, he took a long breath. Perhaps there was healing in this process, in the stories that danced just out of view like shadows in a flickering candlelight. As he prepared for what lay ahead, the gravity of the choices he made bore heavy upon him, yet a glimmer of resilience loosened the grip of doubt. Then came the text that shifted everything, an unexpected revelation from one of his peers that hinted at a deeper trauma, setting his geological array of thoughts quaking. This opened the door to a vulnerability he had not anticipated. The threads of connection stretched and twisted tighter, now threatening to unravel the very fabric of their collective stories. Tyler's resolve stiffened. The confrontation with these shadows was not merely a personal challenge, it was an awakening. Yet the peril within drew closer. What deeper truths were waiting to be uncovered amid their collective pain, and would they emerge with clarity or chaos? The time had come for Tyler to immerse himself in the fray of raw emotion, and he sensed that what lay ahead would irrevocably alter him and those he endeavored to guide. With newfound clarity, he prepared for the uncharted path before him. He was ready to both question and discover where these stories might lead him next. Would their intertwining tales spell liberation or despair? Tyler Thompson had arrived at a nexus of past and present, an intricate tapestry woven from the threads of his grandmother Joan's life and the haunting echoes of his own. Sitting in the same attic where he first unraveled her hidden traumas, he recognized an undeniable shift within himself. The confrontation with those buried narratives of joy and sorrow, resilience and sacrifice had ignited within him an urgency to share and to connect, a desire to risk vulnerability rather than recoil into silence. With his notebook open and pen poised, Tyler wrote feverishly, capturing the revelations of his journey. Words flowed with newfound determination, each sentence refining his understanding of not only Joan's struggles but his own. He had transcended from mere observer of his grandmother's life to an active participant in shaping their shared narrative, a narrative that demanded to be told. At the upcoming storytelling group meeting, Tyler found himself armed with powerful insights. The trepidation that once gripped him had morphed into a solid confidence. Compare this to the Tyler of only weeks ago, standing on the precipice of fear, paralyzed by the weight of expectations and self-doubt. Here, with the echo of Joan's struggles reverberating within him, he had turned the lessons of the past into an empowering narrative that embraced honesty as its core. As the evening meeting commenced, Tyler felt a palpable tension in the room. Eyes turned toward him, filled with curiosity and anticipation. This time he did not shrink, instead, he stood tall, ready to share a part of himself that had long remained hidden. He read aloud a passage detailing not only Joan's pain but the personal revelations that had emerged through the exploration of their intertwined histories. The audience listened, wrapped in the unfiltered sincerity of his words. The responses were immediate and overwhelming. Applause followed, not as mere appreciation but as a testament to the shared experiences that sparked an emotional connection. Participants shared their own stories of resilience, bonding over common threads of struggle. In that moment, Tyler knew he had accomplished something significant. Really understood for the first time. The barriers of isolation and vulnerability had crumbled, replaced with recognition, empathy, and friendship. Post-meeting conversations unfolded like blossoms in spring. Tyler exchanged insights with peers, sharing laughs and tears, processing the intricate layers of trauma and hope. They knew his journey mirrored their own. It was no longer about ownership of pain but the collective transformation that enabled healing. This unfolding sense of community breathed life into Tyler's creative pursuits. No longer was his writing simply a vessel for personal catharsis, it had evolved into a call for shared healing and connection. As he reflected on his grandmother's legacy, he understood it was not just about telling her story, it was about inspiring others to acknowledge and embrace their own narratives. Proving that vulnerability could indeed forge unbreakable bonds. In weeks that followed, Tyler dove into collaborations with his storytelling companions, crafting joint pieces that intertwined individual shadows with luminous themes of strength and enduring legacies. Each collaboration allowed him to refine his craft, gaining recognition not just for the stories he told, but for how they connected people. They held literary showcases across their community, garnering applause from neighbors, friends, and family who resonated with the complexity of shared experiences. As invitations to publish began rolling in, Tyler felt a surge of accomplishment. This was what he had sought: a voice, a purpose, and a clear path ahead that merged the rich lessons of the past with the promise of the future. He demonstrated growth that was no longer tethered to fear, but rather empowered by the legacy he was committed to honoring. Standing before audiences, Tyler shared the essence of his journey, how embracing Joan's hidden traumas forged paths of understanding that propelled them both toward transformation. The joy of recounting their story infused him with solid confidence. He had not only conquered his fears but redefined his narrative. His accomplishments lay not just in published works but in the relationships nurtured along the way. Community, creativity, and commitment had breached the gap between generations, offering a manifesto for resilience and hope. As he collected accolades alongside his peers, Tyler realized the most profound achievement. The real victory was recognizing that personal growth could be a contagious catalyst for change, a flame that ignited a collective journey toward vulnerability and empowerment. The time for Tyler to embrace his new self had arrived. The hidden traumas he feared had not defeated him, instead, they had transformed him, unraveling layers of a narrative that connected him not only to his grandmother but to a larger human experience. In that attic filled with echoes, he discovered his voice, and in that discovery, a new sense of purpose. Now, as audiences applauded the stories that came alive around him, he could only smile, knowing the journey was just beginning. He had found his path and paved it into tangible transformation, proof that despite the weight of the past, the shimmer of potential lay just ahead. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.